Welcome back to the Push Pull Podcast. I'm Varun Rajan. When I started this podcast, I named it Push Pull because it was about career transitions, the forces that push you out of one thing and pull you towards the next. And that's definitely still in here in the conversations that I'm having, but somewhere between when I started this podcast and now, the show has become something a little different. It's becoming a lot more about the future of work and more specifically about what it takes to build a life through work that actually holds up, what's durable, what you can carry forward when everything else is shifting right now in 2026 with the macroeconomic environment and AI. My guest today is Helen Huang. Helen is a product leader, a two-time founder, and the creator of Trove, a company building what she describes as the behavioral identity layer for the internet. The short version is that it's a product that helps you understand yourself through what you do and not just what you say. And you'll hear when we get into the conversation, that distinction matters a lot. There are a ton of potential applications for Trove, especially hiring and recruiting and how job seekers are able to present an accurate depiction of themselves based on what they do, kind of a character profile, if you will. As someone that's spent my career focused on adult learning and the talent space, I am super interested in how people are figuring out how to show up as job seekers, as well as how people approach upskilling themselves at the jobs that they have right now. And so I was super excited to talk to Helen about what she's building right now. Helen has had one of the more interesting career arcs I've gotten to learn about this season. She went from earth science to product management at Zynga, Microsoft, GitHub, to founding CoLab, an EdTech company that she bootstrapped to 7 figures, to taking a year off, to building Trove, and somewhere in that gap year, she also hosted a garbage bag fashion show, and I'll let her explain that one when we get into the conversation. What I'll say going in is that Helen is someone who combines genuine curiosity, a real care for people finding fulfillment and success in their lives, and a bias towards just doing things that I find genuinely refreshing, and I think you'll hear it too. We're here with Helen Huang. How you doing, Helen?
I'm doing good.
Awesome. Remind me again. Okay, so when did we last connect? It was probably like 5 or so years ago. I remember getting in touch with you. You were working on CoLab.
Yep.
You were a founder of CoLab, and I think I was at Check Skills at the time. We were working on trying to find ways for bootcamp students to get jobs, and I think that was kind of the basis for our conversation back then.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were trying to either talk about like a partnership of some sort or some sort of pathway to experiential learning and like hands-on learning. But yeah, that's definitely the last time that I got in touch with you.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think that we're still focused on a lot of the same problem sets, which is one of the reasons I'm really excited to talk to you today. Tell me, before I start asking about Trove specifically and all these other things, I also want to get a sense of like your whole career trajectory and story and all that kind of stuff. But tell us a little bit about yourself and how you would introduce yourself and what you care about.
Cool. Oh gosh, yeah, I haven't had a podcast or interview or anything for so long. I've just been heads down grinding by myself on Trove. So it's nice to be asked again. It's nice to believe that someone cares. Okay, anyhow, so my background, I was born in China. I immigrated to Canada as a kid. I graduated from the University of Waterloo, but not in engineering or computer science. I actually studied earth science and then realized that I wanted to pivot into tech. That pivot was extremely hard, but I ended up finding my way. So I was a product person at Zynga first, and then I ended up moving to Seattle to work at Microsoft and later GitHub as also a PM. Then in 2021, I ended up moving back to Toronto to start up my last company, CoLab. So that was fully bootstrapped. And again, as I was all around experiential learning, like helping non traditional tech talent break into the industry, helping career switchers get the experience, confidence, and community that they needed to really transition into a career that was going to be better for them. So I did that for a couple of years, and the company is actually still going. It's now led by my co-founder Shifumi, and they're still doing some pretty good stuff even to date. But I left that in 2024 mainly to one, pursue a little bit of a gap year, but there was so much happening within AI at the time, and it's only increased now. But the feeling that I got was, whoa, okay, I need to take the time to actually learn all of these skills from the ground up because there's going to be a fundamental shift. And I'm excited to see what I can do within it, really. So I ended up taking a gap year, an adult gap year between 2024 to 2025. And in the later part of that gap year, starting to play around with a lot more different ideas in AI, all around the concept of helping people live authentically, helping them find where is the right fit for them, like all of those kinds of themes. Essentially, I care a lot about AI being part of our lives, but how can we make humans more human? And how can we allow human relationships to flourish while centering the individual? So, a lot of those kinds of themes, and that's also how I ended up landing on Trove. But I would say that's a little bit of like a spiral of what has brought us here.
Yeah, totally. I'd love to dig into a little bit more of what you just called a spiral because I think there's probably a really compelling story there. When you decided early on that you wanted to pivot into tech from the kind of like earth sciences stuff that your education was leading you into, what was there any sort of clarifying moment that kind of brought you there? What were the things that you were like looking to achieve or get done when you made that switch?
Honestly, Varun, all my reasons are so silly. And I think I'm a good example of somebody who, like a good example that you don't need to know exactly what it is that you want to do in order to eventually make the impact that you want to make. Because I feel like I've spoken to so many students that are very clear as to what it is that they want to achieve. Like they want to be a founder, they want to be a PM, they want to be in tech, stuff like that. But that was actually never my story at all. I wanted to get into tech because my boyfriend at the time was in the US. And so I needed to get away into the US, and the only companies that would sponsor visas were tech companies. That is actually the only reason completely. I had no idea what product management was. All of those things came together, and I think that's also why nowadays I really believe that you have to just take one step in front of the other because you'll discover the plethora of opportunities as you do that, and that you don't need to plan so much and be so much in your head to ultimately execute something that you're really passionate about. But no, I had I had no North Star, no pulling vision. I have that now, but back then there was nothing.
No, that's great. That's actually like super insightful. I'm curious what when you were looking for those jobs and you had that kind of want you just like you needed to get into the US, you wanted to be with your partner at the time. How did that kind of how did that desire or aim or outcome that you wanted did that translate into how you were showing up in actually like searching for those opportunities, how you were pitching yourself as a PM, all that kind of stuff, or was it a hindrance? Did it feel like you talk a little bit about putting one step in front of the other and not necessarily knowing exactly what you want while you're pursuing it, because your reasons were pretty like divergent from the actual like day-to-day job, right? So
Right.
yeah, so I'm curious, like did it fuel you in certain ways, did it hold you back in others?
I would say that I ended up breaking up with that boyfriend and I was never able to make it into the US while we were together. So
Okay.
even though that was the initial spark, it didn't end up happening, which is also totally fine. I'm happy with how things ended up now. But so I would say that during the job search process, in hindsight, all of the things that we ended up teaching at CoLab, and I'm sure you guys taught your students at Chegg, I didn't actually take advantage of any of those things. I wasn't reaching out to anybody that I knew, wasn't hitting up recruiters or hiring managers, was not even doing mock interviews with my friends. Again, it was all a reasonably silly way of breaking in. But I would say the one thing that never faltered was just the perseverance and the never giving up. Because I think, again, speaking to even some students now trying to make a pivot or trying to get their first full time job, I think a lot of them are relying on tools. They're relying on not having to submit so many apps. For reference, my own pipeline at the time, I think, and this was pre any AI tools helping any sort of submission, keep in mind, I was at 800 apps where I was probably half of them personally crafting a
Wow.
actual cover letter. And of the 800, I only had 4 interviews. So I think, and now as for showing up for those interviews, I definitely grinded and I like interview prepped by
Sure.
myself a lot. And it wasn't, at the time, it was really a realization that the goal is to get the role and to see what
Yep.
happens in the role, not necessarily for any personal reason. But yeah, no, I think looking back, it's really interesting because that those job apps, like I did that over the span of probably 2, 3 months. And yeah, it was very disheartening to like never hear back for even the ones that I would put in a lot of effort for the cover letter. And again, I think part of it is at the time, like my background and what it is that I was studying, it didn't really pattern match the expectation that a lot of recruiters or hiring managers had as well, right? Because that's how we treat a resume. It doesn't really look at what you're capable of, it just looks at what you've done. Yeah, I feel like I've been through that, and I give my old self a pat on the back for persevering.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think I love that it comes back to that insight of the resume being like what you've done and not really a good signal for capability as a candidate for a job. I don't know how much you want to go through the time that you were a PM at Microsoft and at GitHub, but I'm genuinely curious about what you liked about it. What were the things that were difficult about it? And ultimately, you chose to move on. There was a move associated with it, right? Like a physical move going back to Canada, to Toronto, if I recall correctly. But you moved to being a founder. So I'm
Mhm.
curious about what was it that you experienced in those roles ultimately that you liked and didn't like, and how did that inform the transition that you ultimately
Mhm.
made?
I'm so grateful to have done those roles, honestly, as a PM, because I truly recognize now what it means when they say product is so similar to being like a mini CEO. I will say for anyone listening that, there's a lot of differences as well. But some of the traits that I was able to learn around like project management, communication, like cross functional team development, right? All of these things are so core to what it takes to also be a founder. And I think during my time at Zynga, Microsoft, and GitHub, because there was both like at Zynga a very crazy time period where I was on a product with only one other PM who was my manager, and we were getting sued at the time and had to like change our name, and then our reviews tanked to 1 star, and then the CEO of Zynga at the time emailed our team as like an example of what not to do. So that was like a very stressful, hectic time, all the way through to now bigger, much bigger company, figuring out how to navigate what it actually means to work at a big company and seeing how things are structured, how teams are structured, how projects flow down and map up to a greater vision, how that vision is communicated. I feel like those were all amazing things that I was really grateful to learn. There was also like one of my managers, like one of my first managers at Microsoft, also said something that I still carry with me today, which was, hey, at the time, I think I had submitted a spec and like people gave me all sorts of feedback. And I felt, oh, why didn't I get this perfectly? Right? Like, why is there this feedback? He had just like an offhand comment about, oh, if everything went perfectly the first time round, like life would be extremely boring. And sometimes I still think back to that so many years ago, and I think about how I go through the things I do now and the mistakes that I make. And yeah, actually, if I did get it for perfectly the first time, like there would be really no purpose, and it just wouldn't feel exactly the same. So again, a lot of really solid stuff that I felt I learned from working in corporate and working alongside people, and also professionalism. So all of those things I think I was able to bring to my first company, and now hopefully to my second.
Yeah. And tell me about the decision to leave corporate and start your own thing.
So at the time, EdTech was also booming at the time. So part of it was a great market for what it is that we were trying to do, me and my co-founder for CoLab, Shivumi. And I think we just felt significant user pull. We were getting a lot of like inbound people interested in the exact thing we were trying to solve, which was again helping people like ourselves break into the industry. Because both him and I had the experience of like how difficult it is when you might not have the right matching background. So that's what we were super passionate about. And then when we were getting a bunch of people messaging in, responding to what it is that we were posting, sharing what it is that we were saying, I think it was a very clear sign that, okay, we're really onto something here. So we had the pull from the company side, but at the same time, I think, again, I had been at Microsoft for almost 4 years at that point, and I was also excited to try something new. I never saw myself really as a entrepreneur. Like I didn't go into my work thinking that, oh, eventually I'm going to be a founder. It really wasn't a thought in my mind. I liked working on projects, I liked doing things, and I liked like helping people. But I think it really took my co-founder to pull and be like, hey, why don't we actually just try this out for real? And so quit my job, was confident that we were going to make 200K that first year. Did not happen. Did not make 200K first year, second year. Did not make any money first year, frankly, because we were just fully bootstrapped. But wouldn't go back and change it for the world anyway.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the process of building CoLab and lead me up to the kind of like the decision of taking a career break ultimately.
Yeah, building CoLab was so much fun. It was so much fun. And I looking back, I also recognize how lucky it was, seeing as it was literally my first ever company. I had never tried to build anything really for money before that at that point. So I feel really grateful for the amount of progress we were able to make from a business perspective, because we were able to bootstrap it to over seven figures in revenue and profitability by the end of the 4 years. But also on the impact side, right? Because we ended up graduating over 2,500 students all around the world, many of which had never been even able to like build their confidence at all in the workplace. So I think being able to grow people's confidence was really heartwarming to me. And also in our final, like in 2024, 2025 as well, and probably also this year, we were also able to train hundreds of Black Canadians in product and AI as well. I feel really happy about all of the progress that we were able to make. I think there was in 2024, there were a lot of changes as well with our business model, right? Like the industry was not doing well on its own, which is also why we pivoted partially into working with like government and working with like provincial government to facilitate a lot of these training programs so that they could be free and that we were able to deliver them to more people.
Oh,
And
very
so we
cool.
were around that frame phase of company, but if I projected ahead, I could also see that was unlikely to change in the upcoming few years, frankly, because I fundamentally believe that good education, like education at depth, cannot scale. That is my hot take.
Yeah.
Um, because if you want to educate and do it really well, you just can't think about it from the perspective of, oh, I'm going to try to hit millions or right, because you're just not going to have the real impact on every single individual that you might need to achieve. So in 2024, that was the main thing on my mind. And again, as mentioned, I was like already building out little side projects, not side projects, but embedded AI tooling for CoLab while I was still there. And that got my enthusiasm up really high as to what it is that we could achieve in the future. But I also knew that transitioning CoLab from a company that was doing well and really supporting students at depth into something that could really leverage AI in the way that we could see hockey stick growth, which I was also interested in, probably just wasn't going to happen. So the good thing is that my co-founder was also really supportive. We had a long period of conversations about it, and so we ended up deciding, hey, he was going to take the company forward in all of the things that we've achieved to date without me, and that I was going to step back and chill out for a year.
That's awesome. There's a lot there that really resonates with me, especially having been somebody that's worked in education and like worked on, online coding boot camps and all that kind of stuff. The idea that education, like at depth, like doesn't necessarily scale because it's a very human endeavor. People learn very differently. It brings up a couple of different questions that I have. One is, did you see, was that something that, was that a hypothesis that developed that informed kind of more of your experimentation with AI, like within CoLab, right? Being like, okay, how do we achieve this hockey stick growth? Things are changing in the market. There are new tools at our disposal. There's Khan Academy doing all of the stuff for like personalization, and so was Chegg, and all of these other
Mhm.
EdTech companies are kind of like moving in that direction because there's this new capability that's like cannibalizing a bunch of different businesses, but at the same time could enable something really amazing for learners, right? And so it's kind of like a two-pronged question. One is, did that inform kind of what you were trying out? And ultimately it sounded like you landed on that spot of like, I don't think that like the kind of growth that we're aiming for is going to be possible. And the second question is like, what do you think as, as CoLab, as you've seen it kind of like adapt to the new environment and like train folks on AI and all that kind of stuff, what do you think people who are evangelizing AI tools and adoption of AI tools are getting wrong today? Because I have some takes on that too, but I'd be curious to know, yeah, like both from your experience, what you were seeing in terms of how education could scale, given the fact that there's all of these like developing tools. And then also it's like, what are people getting right and wrong about where we think the future is headed in terms of how we're skilling people for the workforce?
Both solid questions. I'll start with the first one. I think the first thing with CoLab is we didn't understand our users as deeply as I believe we should have. Because the entire positioning, not entire position, because we would never position it as if we were going to help like students get a job, but that is, if that is the end goal expectation of a student, then you have to help them in the areas that they actually need help, which means establishing more of a team on the like the post learning experience, for
Mm.
example. But Shivumi and I were both very focused at the initial stages of, hey, just the education phase, because the whole concept was that I think one thing that career switchers get wrong is that the goal is to land a job,
Hmm.
because the goal is actually to succeed in the role, right? It's to be in a place where you can flourish and you're learning what you want to learn and you're respected, and like that is the goal. And I think that is one positioning piece that all boot camps generally don't focus on, but is also the goal. But then I think with boot camps, I have so many thoughts about boot camps at this point in time that I just will not rant about for now. I think they're
Sure.
great. I think they're great. I think they're a great learning playground for people to try new skills and to meet new people. And I think doing a cohort based approach where others can learn alongside other people, I think that's awesome. But I do think that the expectations and the business models that follow some of these boot camps are not the right things to necessarily do. But that's like neither here nor there. The tools that I was making at the time were primarily geared around student success throughout the programming.
Hmm.
Throughout the programming. And the other realization that I had was from our users that, hey, what they really wanted was they wanted to land a role. They wanted intros. They wanted all of the referrals that came from after. And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense to create tools to use in situations that people aren't actually asking for. The goal isn't for me to make a tool, right? It's for me to help a customer or a user achieve a thing that they want to achieve.
Yep.
And so the business model and how we were orienting the company just wasn't suited for that, right? Because we were very focused on the education piece. And then I also have my own thoughts on personalized learning and like what that actually means, because part of learning means being like discovering and learning about all sorts of various things that you might not like. But I think nowadays when we think personalized learning, it's just, oh, tailored to exactly what's right for you. But what's right for you is developed in the difference and like robustness of experiences that you gain. Right. So I have also my own thoughts about what intentional personalized learning means. But all of those things were not relevant to CoLab, basically.
No, but it makes sense, right? Like it's a lot of there's so much of the tools and so much of how we talk about this stuff where it's like how do we remove as much friction as possible? But part of learning is the friction of like
Yes,
grappling with things that you don't like, that you don't understand through methods and channels that you don't get in order to like get to those aha moments afterwards, right? Like the
exactly.
process is very much the product in that sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool.
Did I answer the two questions? I don't know.
No, yeah, I think you did. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think also just generally, not just from a boot camp perspective, but also the other thing is the sense that I get a lot of the content that I see about AI tools and bringing things up, like for me, feels very scarcity based. Like it feels like very fear oriented. And
Mm,
that really rubs me the wrong way. And that's something that I'm feeling like I really want to see less of. I want to see more about like the opportunity, like more about having fun, like more about like getting a
totally.
chance to dig into something because you're excited about it. I'm worried that we're like scaring people away from being more effective. And so
I
that's
mean,
yeah.
I totally agree with that as well. I think if you're under pressure and under tension, how are you going to learn effectively? I think we've gotten used to this kind of like fear based mechanism driving news headlines and LinkedIn posts and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's important to recognize that like things are changing. It's probably not changing as fast as many would like you to believe, but I think to be a holistic, curious individual is a good trait. And so, if we're able to help people recognize that, hey, there's going to be certain things in this new world that they can adopt and be really good at, or just be curious in learning, and that it's going to help them in their careers, but they don't need to fully throw away all of the things that they've done in the past. It doesn't remove the expertise that they do have. It does have an opportunity to like improve and help them. I think if we use that kind of language, the expectation and like the excitement will come back to learn some of these tools rather than, oh, we're being left behind. Like we're out of jobs. We're in the permanent underclass. What's the purpose of this?
Tell us about the time off. I'd love to hear about the goals that you had in mind. So tell me a little bit about what you thought you were going to be doing going into it. How did it evolve?
Mm-hmm. In hindsight, I think a year was a bit long. But when I first started my gap year, like I was trying to hit a year. So in my mind, I was like, hey, I actually want the full year off. I'm very grateful that I was able to and had the personal runway to do that, which I know not everyone has, which is also why I'm like, okay, in hindsight, maybe I didn't need the full year. I went in thinking that, okay, I'm going to relax for the first like month or two, and then I'm going to get right on it. I signed up for these AI courses. Didn't take them. My 1 to 2 months of relaxation was actually more filled with, did I make the right decision? Should I go back? Oh no, I'm screwed. Because this was also around the time when like AI was picking back up again, and it was like, oh, if you don't have a job now, you better get a job now because like jobs are going to go away. So then I was
Right.
like, oh, did I really pick the right time? Am I going to have a job? What if I don't level up enough? In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have worried about those things, but definitely even going in prepared, I still felt those things.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. And so what ended up happening is in the first quarter, at the end of the first quarter, I was like, oh man, I need to find a job. So then I started looking for jobs. And I actually went pretty far in the process, like even got an offer for a senior PM role out of New York, but it just didn't it didn't resonate in my heart because I think one thing I didn't realize from just my time at CoLab is how deeply I would care and could care about a mission, and how just money is really not a super big driver for me anymore, which I think previously, like being in Fang, a lot of your peers, like that's what you're talking about. You're talking about comparing total comp. And it taught me that, oh, actually, the years of working on CoLab and like the years of doing something that I really felt like had value and helped others, I can't let go of that anymore. So I think that was a really interesting learning in the first half year of my sabbatical or gap year. And then that realization also kicked off the desire to learn again. So the course that I had taken in month one, I ended up taking in like month seven. It was great learning AI tools like Claude Code, etc. I ended up vibe coding my entire personal website. Took a long time at the time, but I was really proud of having actually been able to do something like that, especially coming from an earth science background and especially having built a company on, oh, if you're non technical, you gotta play to your strengths, but realizing that the non technical label is also something that you give yourself. So lots of like just internal work and like learnings there. I ended up hosting a garbage bag fashion show.
Yeah. Tell me about
Um,
that.
that was so fun. The whole purpose was, honestly, there was no purpose. I just really wanted to do it. And what I wanted to do specifically was I wanted to trick attendees into not realizing whether this is a real show or not. So I had volunteer shopkeepers, quote unquote, who were pretending to sell garbage bags. Like I had the little magazine, I have a whole website. We had photographers, there was a runway, we had models. Like I went very deep into
This
the
was
lore.
a whole social experiment that you just
Yes, yes,
thought.
totally. Yeah, we had like interviewers, we had like VIPs. It was so much fun. And the whole point was, hey, can we create this like immersive world where you don't actually know what's right or what's wrong or like what the reality is? And can we pull people into this world that's fun and like whimsical and exploratory? Which are all things that I feel like after you leave university, it's sometimes hard to get that back. And it's hard to realize that can also be part of your everyday life.
Yeah.
So I was like doing things like that. I hosted a bunch of like life wheel exercises. Once we got 40 people into a room and like it was silent for 30 minutes because everyone was writing a letter to their future selves. So I spent Q1 of 2025 working on things like that. And then Q2 and then eventually Q3 was me getting back into the mindset of, oh, you know what? I have the desire to build something again. I
Let
think.
me let me just take a step back into that like Q1 headspace that Helen had.
Mhm.
It sounds like you acted very quickly on like just sparks of inspiration. Did you have a sense of outcomes in mind, things that you wanted to do other than just like create a fun experience? Yeah, like these are the examples you
Mhm.
shared are two completely different things, right? There's the kind of like trash bag fashion show, which
Mhm.
is hilarious immersive experience, and then there's this kind of like journaling, like the silent in a room for 30 minutes kind of thing. um you know did you have goals during that time, I guess, is the short way to ask that question.
No.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. And part of it is because I knew that I'm the kind of person where I can spend so long setting goals. Like I can spend forever being like, here's an OKR, and here's the KPI, and here's the rock underneath that, and here's how it ladders up, and here's how it's going to make sense in the grand scheme of things. But part of also what I wanted to achieve, I guess, just like internally, was letting that go, because that is a lot of pressure for somebody who thinks a lot, for an
Yeah.
overthinker, for someone who's like hyper vigilant, because that's how I am. I just wanted to, like, with the garbage bag, with Baggy, that's the line, with Baggy, and I'll send you the link after. Like, I
Yeah,
have,
please.
you can even buy a bag.
Oh,
Um,
amazing.
the only thing I wanted to do was prove to myself that I can execute at the pace of my ideas and just have a shit ton of fun. Because I felt already dreary getting sent all of these articles about AI every day. And I just wanted something even for myself that was like, hey, this, my world can be bigger than just the internet and Claude Code. So it really was just fun, execution pace, just wanting to create a fun experience for other people.
Excellent. Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And tell me kind of what came next, how you discovered Trove.
Mhm.
What was your headspace like? And yeah, how did that all evolve?
Do you want the detailed version or like the shorter version?
I think I want to hear whatever you're inspired to tell.
Okay, okay. So basically in May of 2025 is when like my desire to start working on something kicked up again. At the time I was actually creating like a AI arbitrator for legal courts. I got really into civic tech at in that month, in that period. And so I was sitting in on all of these like open that you could listen into as part of the public, right? And one of the common things that I was hearing at the time was a judge who would sometimes need to be like corrected by the representation, like the plaintiffs or the defendant or whomever, because they were making the wrong calls because they had such a backlog of continual arbitrations that they had to go through. So there were so many cases, and the situation, at least in the Ontario, like the landlord tenant board is what I was mainly listening to. There's just such a backlog of items that people are missing the real details, and people are getting the wrong results as a result of that. Right. So I was like, okay, that's exactly what I need. So I ended up creating it. I ended up trying to speak to all of these like volunteers who are fighting for like tenant and also landlord rights. No one was interested. So I spent about a month doing that, realizing no one was interested in adopting AI for that particular problem. And then and so I was like, okay, what do I do next? I still want to figure out, like, there was something around AI helping facilitate conversations, especially hard conversations where there might be benefit of having some objective view. So I swapped into helping co-founders because I was like, okay, business partners also deal with problems. They have communication issues where some person might have a lot more background than the other. Can we bridge the gap and help people communicate better and help them resolve conflicts in their relationship? Spoke to a bunch of business owners, and at the time, I was also pitching this to A16Z Speedrun. I was testing out a new co founder, so I flew to Miami to work with this new co founder for a week. Things didn't work out. We pitched, we didn't get in. And so that company also collapsed. At that point, I was like, okay, maybe it's not in the books for me to be a founder again. Maybe I should just apply to jobs. So I was back in my grind of applying to jobs. So I was in New York for a bit. I spent the summer in New York, but it just so happened that I came across a new accelerator, or not new, but new to me, called BetaWorks in New York City. So I ended up getting into this other accelerator that was right up my alley in terms of creative consumer craft, like really paradigm changing things, because I also knew that, again, I wasn't fit or trying to create like another verticalized B2B SaaS that's meant to increase efficiency, because increasing efficiency also means something else to the people that are there and part of the org, right? So I had a lot of my utopian thinking around some of what AI is aiming to achieve. So I knew that I didn't want to do that. I knew I wanted to, if I were to create a new company, do something that would allow human flourishing, right? Bring back authenticity in an age of AI. Like I knew I wanted to do something around there. And so when I got into beta works with Trove, I think it was a good sign for me that, oh, you know what? I think there's really something here. Now, going through the accelerator was actually had a rough time just personally, because as a solo founder, there was just so much to do, and happy to share more about that. But I think now that I've graduated from the accelerator as of November, and have really built out and shipped a bunch of things, actually heard user feedback, I think it really solidifies the fact that I am now on the right path to achieving all like the things that I think we're going to be able to do.
Yeah, that's great. Just tell me a little bit about Trove. The whole like authenticity, maintaining that, like investing in that in the age of AI. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to us like individually? How is that informing the things that you're working on and what you care about?
Yeah, let me just give a one liner or like a short blurb on Trove first.
Sure.
So, Trove is essentially a new way to understand your authentic self through what it is that you do and not just what it is that you say. So, the way it works is that you'd play through these like daily interactive stories, and based on your decisions, it's building up a character sheet of how you actually are. Now, the broader vision here is that this can become like a behavioral identity layer for the owner to own, or like the user to own, and one that can be plugged into any system that they use. So, like dating, hiring, onboarding, AI personalization, stuff like that. But for now, the main focus is really on the individual players, helping them gain knowledge and like just more awareness of their inner world, and just making sure that we're capturing that robustness and authenticity from them. So that's what Trove is.
That's awesome. One of the things I think I've seen from you, either in one of your job descriptions that you've put up, because I know you're hiring, and honestly, reading through them was actually super insightful to get a sense of what matters to you and what you're really aiming for here. But one of the things that stood out to me, and one of the things I kind of like pride myself on having been able to do with like, career coaching clients that I've had in the past and just with people on a day to day, is like helping people really understand themselves and the things that they want in ways that they haven't been able to articulate to themselves. It sounds like that's a little bit of what you're trying to do here. Because I think one of the things I saw you write was like, we don't really understand ourselves. Like, we have a lot of trouble communicating who we
Mhm.
are to other people and signaling that, like whether it's in dating or whether it's in hiring.
Mhm.
But like that first step of us being able to like understand ourselves is also something that we don't necessarily achieve.
Mhm. This is science. Like, I'm not just saying this is actual science, is that it's really hard for any one of us to really understand our blind spots, right? Because how we are changes on a day to day. It changes based on our feelings that day. Did we eat, whatnot? But it's like we're too close to ourselves to really get an objective view. And we need to fully understand ourselves first before we can even express it to others. Because there's like a two-part problem. Do we know ourselves? And then do we have the right language to explain ourselves in a way that others can receive appropriately? Right. And I think most of the systems that we use today, including like some of these personality assessments or like the profiles that we write or like the prompts on Hinge, most of that focuses on what it is that we say, right? Which is part of it. Part of who we are is what we say. But a big part of who we are is also what it is that we do, right? Because we could say a lot of things. Like think about like a professor, like a politics professor who knows so much information about what democracy is like. But is that really what translates into their real life? Potentially not. So many of us have so much robustness of like information, but that's not actually how we behave. And it's not like our gut feel, and it's not what we do. But to date, none of the tools that we have really capture what it is that we do. So to me, half of who we are, shown through our actions, is actually not being reviewed by any of us.
Hmm.
And I think that's a part of our personality or our character or our values that we should be able to look into and glean information from. And only when we have that can we be able to think about, okay, yeah, what is the right language to use? How do I present my authentic self to others? How do I consume it from other people as well?
Tell me a little bit about you've had like thousands of people go through some Trove games and stuff. Tell me a little bit about like how many people have been through it, have played the games, and also tell me about how it's been received. Like, what are people getting out of it? How is that actually like translated IRL into their lives so far?
So right now, just so you know, we're actually pre-product as well. So
Okay,
we've released a few different demos, which are going to be representative of the full campaign and like the actual experience. But so far, each of these have been like short-term drops or like
sure.
limited time campaigns, for example. So the Valentine's Day one, we wanted to do a series of games called Tangles, by the way, in the Trove universe, because you're untangling these like dilemmas and you're figuring out what to do with them. We had a 2-week campaign in February geared towards a scenario where you as a user are going on a third date with someone and there comes these issues. But the whole point is that at the end, as you play through multiple games in different instances, what are the patterns underneath all of your play? And what can we teach you that you might not have been aware of about your own dating style? So that was
Hmm.
the goal of the game. And I've always been a product person, right? And a lot of times, like, product people don't do super good at marketing. And so I think I probably could have poured far more fuel on the fire from a marketing perspective. But that's why I was also so surprised because we had over 6,000 people visit the site. We had to date now probably around 3,000 players. But during the full end to end, it was 2,200 players that played through the entire thing. The entire thing is a 7-minute experience, which, if you also know how hard it is to even get a second of attention from people, to have known that somebody sat down cold was like, oh, you know what? Let me do this thing. And it pulled them enough to let them complete a 7-minute experience and then eventually log in. I think just I was super happy with the stats basically.
Totally. Yeah,
And
it's
again, if you
incredible.
know anything about consumer stats, we had 77% day 3 retention,
Wow.
34% day 8 retention, and there's no push notifications, right? So, but then that's just on the metrics. I think what was more exciting to me was the inbound emails, because I was getting people were messaging me on LinkedIn being like, hey, there's a bug here. Can you fix it so I can finish the gameplay? Right. And then people message me asking for their full transcript. Because again, part of Trove is that the data you create belongs to you. And I think that's a core ethos of the product as well. And so people were messaging in being like, hey, I want to read my playthrough again. And I was like, okay, sure, let me send it to you. But why? And they were like, oh, I want to show it to my therapist because these are things that we discuss within therapy. And
That's
this is a
wild.
new way of role play that I don't have to spend my therapy time doing, right? And I was like, you know what? Here, that's awesome. That's true. I also had an email from someone who broke up with their ex girlfriend over the game
Oh
because
wow.
they didn't like how they reacted, which again was not part of what I was hoping to achieve. But I think that also speaks to we all have such intense inner worlds that never gets pulled out because the right questions don't get asked. And so if
Yeah.
we have a diverse range of questions that are asked, like what can we learn about each other and ourselves? Um, and it's just so interesting. But that was a lot of the follow ups that I got from people. I also had some folks like play through just in a dumb way, aka trying to play the game, not really trying to react as they would. But then when they got to the end and they realized that, hey, this is learning about themselves and it's a profile about themselves, and there's no game and there's no winning and there's no right answer, they emailed me in asking if I could erase their data so that they could replay it with how it is that they truly felt.
Huh.
And I think now, and that's also why I'm so excited because if we think about it, a resume has stayed the same format for the last 100 years, right? And in tech, we've now pivoted into having portfolios because it matters how people think about things. But with AI making all of what's written and even what's spoken sound perfect on paper, what is the result that's left, right? Like, how do we actually quantify our values and what we believe in and like how good of a communicator we are? And I think every person inside themselves does have a desire to showcase who they truly are. And there were comments just being sent in about the aspect of this like profile and knowing someone's character and seeing someone's character and how that could help in better matching, not just in relationships, friends, but also teams. I think I think it really was reading the emails that came in that got me more and more excited that, hey, I think we're on the path of doing something that is really going to be positive for humanity and in keeping like our human selves.
Yeah, that's incredible. There's a ton of stuff that I asked you, Helen. I'm just curious, like, what's top of mind for you right now? What are the kinds of things that you're excited to do next, whether it's for Trove or any new fashion shows that you're putting together? And what do you hope people take away from like interacting with you? If you could kind of like leave a lesson with anybody that you talk to, if you were to like leave a lesson, or like even like I wish more people would pay attention to X, Y, or Z, what would that
Mhm.
be?
I would say that one, no fashion shows planned in the future.
Okay.
But I would say that if there was a fashion show, it would not be garbage bags, it would be corn stalks.
Ooh.
Because if you think about the corn stalks that are left behind at the grocery store after someone's pulled through all of the corn, hey, we can probably do something with that. Anyhow, I'll just put that aside. But if
Great.
anyone's listening that wants to help with that, let me know. I think if there's so much things on my mind. Frankly, there's so much things because right now I'm in the throes of hiring. Like I'm looking for a founding team, people who really believe in the mission, but also recognize how hard startups are going to be. So that's happening. I'm also actually just kicking off my pre-seed fundraise. So speaking with a lot of investors and angels and like funds right now. So that's also happening. Again, I should probably focus, but I would say my superpower is actually just sheer execution. So
Yeah.
I'm going to get through it and we're going to look back on this episode, Varun, you and I, and we're going to be like,
Hell yeah.
"Oh, don't you remember?" And we're going to cheers.
Yeah.
So it can happen. But I would say if there's anything that I want to leave, I think it's just remembering that the answers are within ourselves already. I've been speaking to a lot of students recently just because they're navigating the job search and, oh, the first full time job. And I think a lot of what is happening, especially with AI, is people feel like AI is giving them the right answer and that's what they should follow. But the truth is, AI is trained on a variety of previous documents and like things that have been written down, but even that there's a lag in that, right? Because the most novel thoughts are probably in our minds and they're not written down, right? So I think it's really important to remember for everyone that you have the right answers for yourself already, right? Yes, you can think and you can listen to anyone's advice on a podcast, you can read a book, but all of those are learnings that person has had for themselves, which is unique to their own situation. I think one of the things that during CoLab I really cared about was the aspect of a flipped classroom and not centering the instructor when it comes to a lecture, but rather centering their own learning. Never think of a teacher as well, yes, they can be a source of truth, right? But you have to do the work of crafting your own narratives and deciding on your own values. And it's the same thing with Trove. I think we're so used to us prompting AI giving us the answer. And with Trove, what I really want to do is, hey, AI prompts us. We give the gut feel, we give the answers. And no matter what it is that we choose to do, there's going to be some spark of individuality. And that's what we need to continue to develop within each person.
I love that. It's incredible. On that note, I did see one of your LinkedIn posts where I think you just had a throwaway line here about like the people that have been applying already that like maybe you would think about like pairing them together or like, letting applicants meet each other. Is that something
Mhm.
that you were actually able to do?
I really want to do it. I still really want to do it. I think what is going to end up happening is, Brune, I need people. I need a team. Because trust me, the solo founder experience is I love it. It's great, but it's also very rough. And I've had some really amazing people be able to help out with Trove, like on contract and stuff, but it really is time to bring on a team. But anyhow, to go back to your answer, I definitely want to do that. First, I need people to opt in. So I'm not going to just randomly do
Yeah,
it.
of course.
But I think I'm going to message people back and be like, hey, are you in? Are you interested? This is not going to lead to a job, but it could lead to someone who, again, is so similar to you or so different in some unique way. And I think that was also the benefit of like really pouring my heart into this job app, like into the job write up,
You really
frankly.
did. Yeah.
Because I think the people that responded gave me that same energy and time back. And I'm very grateful for that because I fundamentally believe that every business or like collection of people really it's a mutual fit and it's a mutual decision.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful for all of the amazing apps. But because of that, I feel like I could do some interesting matching.
Yeah. Do you have a obviously there's the kind of like consumer angle, you're getting people like involved and like playing games and like they're excited to learn more about themselves. Do you have a sense of the use case for which it will be applied sooner rather than later? Like obviously maybe that's down the line. You said you've been talking to hiring teams and stuff like that. There's the kind of like recruiting angle, there's the dating angle. Where are you most interested in the results of Trove showing up in terms of applicability?
I think with Trove, so the first goal really is going to be like the first milestone really is going to still be focusing on the individual user,
Yeah.
and providing them both entertainment and self knowledge, and getting to the point where we have engaged players and they're really giving their inner world and that they trust Trove as the place to do it. So that is the primary first goal. I think once we have that data, there's a lot that can be done with it. One thing that I should say outright to anyone listening is that I'm not interested in providing this information to ads, and I'm not interested in doing that. What I think is that this is, again, it's the concept of a resume, right? And a user owns their own resume. So if a user wants to give it to their therapist, if they want to plug it into ChatGPT, if they want to attach it to their resume, I think a user should be able to do that. What I'm excited about is paving the ground for that. Obviously, coming from an EdTech future of work background, the thing that interests me the most really is disrupting this concept of job applications, candidate experience, fit for the company, and rethinking that entire process. But I also know that within that process, there's a lot of regulatory things as well, right? I think I'm very aware of the roadblocks, but that would be the industry that I'm most excited about disrupting. But I also think that it will, again, be based on the individual. I think
Yeah.
the dating space is probably a little bit more relevant just as an immediate jump because on both sides, there's value in bringing your authentic selves. If you care to do that, obviously, like if you're maybe not so much if you're just looking for a hookup, but if you're looking for something that lasts, I think that's what matters. And so maybe the jump there is a little bit shorter. And so from a go to market perspective, that might actually be what comes next. But first and foremost, focusing on the consumer.
Cool. Um, Thank you, Helen. This is awesome. And also someone who's kind of like education, future of work oriented. Obviously, I'm eager to kind of like learn about how this stuff evolves generally, but I think you gave us a really great breakdown on how you think about things and what the opportunities are here. And I know you kind of like left it with, I kind of asked you about like, what would you leave for the audience a little bit before? And then I had to dive into more questions because there's just so many things that I love to just get your insights on. Super, super loved having you on. Thank you for taking the time and sharing all of your thoughts with me and sharing your story with me too.
No, thank you. Thank you for asking the right questions and pulling it out.
I appreciate it. Something that really stayed with me after this conversation is something Helen said near the end. She was describing what Trove is trying to do, and she put it this way. We're so used to prompting AI and obviously waiting for it to build stuff for us and do stuff for us, but also waiting for the answer from AI. And what she's building is really looking to invert that. AI prompts us, and we use our gut feel to give the answers. And I think that's one of the most interesting framings I've heard this year for what's actually at stake in this moment. Because the risk isn't just that AI might give us the wrong answers. That risk exists, but the real risk is that we stop being the ones with the answers at all. That we hand over our instincts and not just the task. Helen talks about self-understanding as a first step, not as a therapeutic exercise, but as something genuinely practical. And I find myself agreeing with that completely. When I think about what a career is, I think it's a series of outcomes that come from relationships. And relationships, real ones, whether personal or professional, require you first to develop a relationship with yourself. And that starts with you actually knowing who you are, what you value, how you operate, what you're willing to do and what you aren't willing to do. And if you don't have that clarity, you're just optimizing for the wrong things and wondering why it doesn't feel right, wondering why you're burning out, wondering why you're feeling disengaged or languishing. What struck me about Helen is that she doesn't just believe this intellectually, she spent her gap year living it. She followed sparks of curiosity without needing an OKR to justify them. She executed at the pace of her instincts. The fashion show, the Civic tech experiment, all of it, not because she had a strategy, but because she trusted that moving toward the thing that lit her up and captured her interest in itself was the information that she needed to move forward. And then she built a company out of that conviction. She also has a perspective on AI that I really want to hold on to, that approaching it from curiosity rather than fear isn't just healthier, it's more honest. The fear-based framing, and I think I'm annoying people with how often I'm bringing this up, but the fear-based framing, the permanent underclass, that jobs are going away, I'm not saying that those things are things that we should necessarily ignore or that aren't true, but what I am saying is that it tells you nothing useful or practical for what you should be doing in this moment. The curiosity framing opens a question instead of closing one. If this conversation landed for you, share it with someone who's trying to figure out who they are before they figure out what they want to do. And I'll see you next week.